The NHL roster freeze is officially over, and for the Carolina Hurricanes, the real season may be entering its most decisive phase. With the trade deadline approaching fast, every move now carries playoff implications. This is no longer about experimentation, it's about positioning for a deep run. Carolina returns from the Olympic break in a strong competitive situation. Several players represented their countries successfully, bringing back medals and valuable high-pressure experience. That international exposure often sharpens contenders rather than slowing them down. Momentum, however, can be fragile after long breaks. Before the pause, the Hurricanes were one of the hottest teams in hockey, riding a 10-game point streak that reinforced their identity as a disciplined contender. The challenge now is restarting that rhythm immediately. Around the league, contenders are accelerating roster decisions. Carolina finds itself in a familiar but critical position, good enough to compete now, yet possibly one move away from becoming truly dangerous in the postseason. One of the most encouraging developments for the Hurricanes isn't a trade rumor, but health. Key players returning to the ice dramatically change internal expectations heading into March. Depth suddenly looks more stable than it did weeks ago. Eric Robinson's return adds energy and flexibility to the forward rotation. Meanwhile, Frederik Andersen rejoining the group stabilizes the goaltending outlook, an area that often determines playoff survival. Healthy contenders historically outperform aggressive buyers at the deadline. The anticipated arrival of Nikolai Ehlers further strengthens offensive balance. Instead of rushing into panic acquisitions, Carolina may now evaluate the market from a position of control rather than desperation. This healthier roster creates an interesting dilemma for management. Do they trust internal improvement, or do they still pursue an external upgrade to raise the team's offensive ceiling before the deadline arrives? Much of the pre-freeze speculation centered around Artemi Panarin, a name heavily connected to Carolina in league discussions. Ultimately, the winger's destination was never truly open once Los Angeles became his preferred landing spot. For general manager Eric Tulsky and the Hurricanes' leadership, the situation reflects a modern NHL reality. Sometimes negotiations fail not because of assets or effort, but because player preference dictates outcomes. Still, missing out on a marquee talent leaves strategic questions unanswered. Carolina showed interest, which signals the organization understands it may need another offensive weapon to compete with elite Eastern Conference rivals. That failed pursuit may actually reveal more about Carolina's intentions than a completed trade would have. The Hurricanes are clearly exploring impactful upgrades rather than settling for minor depth additions. If there is one position repeatedly linked to Carolina internally, it's the search for a reliable second-line center. Playoff hockey often exposes teams lacking depth down the middle, especially against physically dominant opponents. However, the Hurricanes' front office has built a reputation for unpredictability. Instead of targeting a center, they could prioritize a scoring winger and maintain Logan Stankoven's role within the current structure. This strategic flexibility makes Carolina difficult to read across the league. Opposing executives know the Hurricanes rarely leak intentions, which allows them to strike quickly when opportunities appear. With less than 2 weeks remaining, the expectation across NHL circles is clear. Carolina is unlikely to remain completely quiet before the deadline passes. On the ice, upcoming games may ultimately influence management decisions more than trade rumors. Carolina faces a demanding stretch, beginning with critical home matchups against Tampa Bay and Detroit. Those games arrive under favorable scheduling conditions, including additional rest compared to opponents. Strong performances could reinforce confidence in the current roster construction heading into deadline day. The Western road trip that follows may become the true evaluation period. Matchups in Seattle and Vancouver will test consistency before the roster is finalized for the playoff push. By the time Carolina reaches Alberta after the deadline, the organization's vision for the postseason will be locked in. Whether through patience or bold action, the Hurricanes are approaching a defining moment in their season.